We are in chapter 8, the end of chapter 8 of the book of Shoftim, Judges. The story that we read last week is a continuation of the story of Gideon and how ultimately Gideon destroyed Midian. Midian was a major source of suffering for the Jewish people. And Gideon did a great favor to the Jewish people, risked his life, and many of the Jewish people risked their lives to fight this huge enemy, this huge army. And yet Gideon succeeded. Not only did he conquer them, but he even made sure to destroy every last leader of theirs, to the extent that even after he was successful in winning a war against the Midianites, he ran after them to try to catch the remnants of the leaders and destroy and kill them, and he did. It was so dangerous, his mission, that the Jewish people that lived nearby, there were two cities that we spoke about, the people of Penuel and
Sukkot.
Sukkot, thank you. Those two places, Gideon wanted their help. He wanted a little food from them, and they refused. And one of the reasons they refused was the fact that Gideon is no way going to win over the enemy. And therefore, if they help out Gideon, the enemy is going to be angry with them. Now, keep in mind, Gideon had already destroyed over 100,000 troops of the enemy. And he only had 300 people. And yet, the people of Penuel and the people of Sukkot really were not convinced that he's going to win. They thought he's going to lose, which means that even the remnants that was left of the enemies, they were much stronger than the Jewish people, and besides, the Jewish people were outnumbered many times over. And so they really were not convinced that Gideon was going to win. But Gideon went forward and he pursued these Midianites. And really, he was doing it for the Jewish people. He didn't need it. In other words, he was doing it for these cities, for the city of Sukkot and the city of Penuel. He was helping them out, really, because they're the ones benefiting. And the reason why they're the ones benefiting is because Gideon really lived on the west side of the Jordan River. And the Midianites lived on the east side of the Jordan River. And the Jewish people that he wanted help from lived on the east side of the Jordan River. So really, if you think about it, those were the people who were going to benefit more than he was. And yet they refused to help him. And that was obviously really a sign of disunity, really a sign of disconnection and a disconnect, a feeling where they don't feel responsible to help each other, even when it's dangerous. That's really where it means something, is when you help someone when it's not easy. See, to help someone when you have an extra, you have something extra, it's very easy to help someone. Let's say you have some extra time, so you'll help someone pick someone up, give someone a ride, help them pack up or do, move, whatever you're helping them with. Very easy if you're free. What about if you're busy or if you have other things, and yet, when you help them when it's hard for you, that's really where you show, where you show that you care about each other. When you're rich and you give $100 to someone to help them out, or no big deal. What about when you're poor and you help someone with $100 or $1,000? That's when it really means something. and so the people of Sukkos and Penuel, true, it was a little scary what they were, to help out the Jewish people because they were nervous that what could happen afterwards. But the fact is, Gidon was obviously chosen by Hashem to a certain extent, to whatever they believed. We know that he was fully chosen by Hashem, but whatever they, to the extent they understood, I mean, he won this major war against the Midianites, and he was there, he was definitely so righteous in a certain sense, and had, he was the leader, and they should have shown some type of unity to help out another yid, even if it was dangerous. I'll give you an example. Like, there was many times there was sickness going around in in different cities in Europe, and so when you took in a guest, it was always a danger. Just like now, people are all nervous. You can't invite anyone over, but the fact is there were numerous people in Europe years, generations back. They would help out. They would still take guests, even though they were risking to a certain extent. You help out another yid who's stuck. Nowadays, you could just give them some money, help them with money. They could take a hotel. But in those days, Russia, there were certain times when there were major sicknesses, diseases going around, and yet a yid always helped out another yid. Even though you're taking it's a risk, but that's where charity really means something. That's where kindness, that's where loving your neighbor really means something. When it is a risk, and yet you still do it. So this is the mistake that the people of Penuel and Sukkos made, and
chapter 8.
Ultimately, Gidon did win, even though without food and without rest, they pursued. They pursued the people of the two kings, the two. I don't know if they were actually kings or leaders, two leaders of the Midianite camps, of Midianite families, and they ultimately captured them and killed them. And then Gidon went back, and the names of the two leaders were Zebach and Salmuna, I should mention. And ultimately, Gidon then went back and punished the people of Sukkos and the people of Penuel. And then he killed these two. He captured these two kings, Zebach and Salmuna, and then he killed them. He wanted his son to kill them, but ultimately he went and he killed them. And what we ended last week was where Gidon declined being a ruler. The people wanted Gidon to be a king, and they wanted it to be a hereditary position. Not only Gidon would be king, but they wanted it to be transferred afterwards to his children and to the grandchildren. And Gidon said, absolutely not. Hashem is the king over us. And that's really more or less where we ended. And so we're approximately chapter 8, verse 22 or 23. So let's start with verse 23. But Gidon said to them, I shall not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. Hashem shall rule over you. And this is where Gidon is not looking for honor. He's not looking for money. He's looking simply for the Jewish people. He's not looking for retirement. I'm sure they included the retirement package, but he wasn't looking for that. He was looking for the Jewish people and what Hashem would want, and that is he wanted Hashem to rule over them. They should realize that really their success, their support should all be from Hashem and not from just because they have some righteous ruler. It's it's a temporary fix to have a ruler, but that's really not the ideal. The ideal is that they should directly be inspired to do the right thing from Hashem. So verse 24 says, then Gideon said to them, I shall make a request of you. Let each of you give me a nose ring from his booty, for they had golden nose rings since they were Ishmaelites. So it seems that the Ishmaelites, for some reason, they were into nose rings. And the Midianites came from Ishmael because one of the kids of Keturah, which was Hagar, gave birth to Midian, so they're considered connected to Ishmael, and they wore nose rings. Now, the Jewish people had conquered this huge army, and one of the things that they got, in addition to tremendous amount of booty, was the nose rings. So Gideon says, each of you should give me a nose ring. They said, we shall surely give. I mean, a nose ring was nothing compared to what they had compared to the amount of booty that they possessed, that they won from the war with Midian. You know, a nose ring was like nothing. It's like asking someone for a dime. And additionally, I don't know if people know this, but a nose ring can't be too heavy, because if it's too heavy, it'll hurt the nose. It'll be too painful. Could tear it. So a nose ring obviously is a very, very small amount of weight to it. So it couldn't have been too big. And the nose ring, to ask these people for a nose ring was nothing. So they said, sure. They spread out a garment. Every man threw into it a nose ring from his booty. It says the weight of the nose rings that he requested was 1,700 gold dinars. Aside from the crescents and the pendants, the purple wool garments worn by the kings of Midian, and aside from the chains on the necks of their camels, this was besides all that. This was the weight of the nose rings was a huge amount of money. You can imagine how huge that the army was, that they had all these nose rings. And Gideon made it into an ephod and hung it in his city in Ophrah. Now, what is an ephod? He made an ephod, it says. So what is an ephod? Well, an ephod, at least the way we read about it in the garments of the Kohen, of the priests in the temple, they wore an ephod. An ephod was a garment that was like an apron, and it wrapped around to the front, and it tied in the front, and this was this was a garment that Gideon he made a mold. It made like he made a model of an ephod out of gold. So he made this ephod, this garment, this gold into like a garment-looking item, and he hung it in his city, in Ophrah. Now, the reason he did it, he meant well. Gideon meant well. He was a righteous man, to a certain, at least to some extent. He was, meant well, and he wanted everyone to realize what a huge army the Midianites had, and how Hashem allowed the Jewish people to conquer them with 300 people. That's quite an accomplishment. 300 people winning over, they could see from the amount of gold in this apron, they could tell that it was huge. There was a huge army that they won over with just 300 people. Now, according to another opinion, it wasn't an apron, it was more like a belt. But either way, however you learn, it was definitely a large amount of gold, and it made an impact. People would see it. They, you know, at least his intent was that people should acknowledge this great miracle that Hashem brought. Now, the Alshach, which is one of the commentaries, points out that another reason he made the ephod was because each of the garments of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, they were supposed to atone for certain sins. And the ephod atoned for idol worship. So Gideon chose the ephod because he wanted there to be some clarity that the Jewish people should know that they were forgiven from the sin of idolatry, and the idolatry was what caused the Jewish people to be humiliated under Midian's leadership. So if they see this and they know that it symbolizes atonement for idolatry, it'll also remind them that, you know why Midian ruled over you? Because of idolatry. And ultimately, we won over them because Hashem forgave us. And don't fall back into idolatry. That was, you know, the message that he was trying to convey was don't fall back into this. However, and this is sad, but it actually ended up becoming worshipped as an idol. This ephod, this apron or belt, it ended up being worshipped as an idol, believe it or not. So we're going to read the next verse.
Rabbi Smith.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that this reminds me of the container of mun that was put away as a reminder. I'm just wondering if there's a similarity between that and this.
Now, was the container of mun ever worshipped?
No.
No. So I would say if you want to compare it to something, compare it to something that ended up being worshipped.
The golden calf?
Well, the golden calf is easy to compare it to because but the thing is that was initially meant to be worshipped. But let's pick something that wasn't meant to be worshipped, but ended up being worshipped. So I believe the snake, the copper snake, I believe they had to hide the copper snake because it was becoming something that they wanted to worship. And there might be other items as well. I'm not sure if there was there a piece of wood from Noah's Ark that they worshipped. And there were always throughout history, we've always had some issues with items that they had to hide because otherwise they were getting worshipped.
There was a book of healing.
That's right.
From Shlomo HaMelech that had to be hidden because people started to worship it.
That's right. That's right. So these are the things that I would say, maybe it's similar to. It ended up becoming a item of worship. And
I was thinking in terms of like an item that was a holy thing that the Jews put away as a reminder of a great miracle that Hashem gave to them.
mhm. Okay, yeah. So you could say, you could say it's similar to that. Yeah. So, so this is the story of the ephod, and it concludes, unfortunately, on this negative note. Gideon made it into an ephod and hung it in his city in Ophrah and Ophrah in the Hebrew. Eventually, all of Israel strayed after it there, and it became a snare for Gideon and his household. So the reason he did it in Ophrah was because that's where the miracle occurred, and it would be a constant remember of Hashem's salvation. One of the commentaries says, but that was a mistake, that it was put there in Ophrah. It should have been put where the tabernacle is in Shiloh. Now, there is a commentary of the Ramban that says the reason why they worshipped the ephod was because they were used to asking the breastplate when they had a question, and the Kohen Gadol would ask the Choshen what to do in certain scenarios. He wasn't sure. They weren't sure what to do. They would ask the breastplate. They would so this led them to start honoring Gideon's ephod. Even though of course it was not. There was absolutely no permissible way of doing it. They should never have worshipped it. It's totally prohibited. But they for whatever reason, they had their desire to worship it. So it became sort of like a sin on Gideon's part, because somehow we sort of hold him a little guilty, like maybe he should have figured out that it's dangerous to have something that people might end up worshiping. In any event, the verse continues and it says that thus Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, and they did not continue to raise their head, and the land was tranquil for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Now, those two sentences sound fine, but listen to the next sentence. Yerubbaal, son of Joash, went and settled in his home. Now, what does that mean? He went and he settled in his home. Now, yes, Mel.
Yeah, that's right. I just wanted to point out, I think that's why we don't know where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried, because people would have made a whole god out of him also. So
that's
it's a
right.
dangerous thing, that's why I just wanted to point that out. I know it's off the
no, it's on topic. Wow. That's right on topic. Thank you, Mel. Very good point. And that's one of the reasons why Jacob did not. Is that what you were going to say, Will?
No, I'm going to say something contemporary. Finish your sentence first.
I was going to say that's why Jacob didn't want to be buried in Egypt, because he was nervous that the Egyptians would make an idol out of him. And so Jacob, said, bring me immediately, get me as soon as possible, get me out of Egypt. I don't want the Egyptians worshiping me.
So the U.S. Navy must have been reading the book of Judges, because Osama bin Laden, his body was taken to a ship, taken out into some point in the northern part of the Atlantic, and dumped there with an official Muslim burial ceremony.
Uh-huh. I don't know if the Arabs pray to their heroes or not, but yeah, maybe. Uh-huh. In any event, so the story here is that Yerubal, the son of Yoash, the Yerubal is the same as Gideon, he went and he settled in his home. Now, really what this means is, I have to be honest with you, we are going to be reading a very sad part of our history in a few verses later. And the only positive thing about it is that at least we know it's true, because it's so embarrassing that we wouldn't, if we didn't have to keep to the truth, we would definitely want to remove this from history. But it's part of our history, and it is a very sad part of our history. So the commentaries want to say that they're looking for hints to what led to this type of a terrible thing, the real tragic ending to the family, to Gideon's family. And the fault was a Jewish person. But, a real sad part of the book of Shoftim. But so they want to see some connection here. So one connection they see is the fact that Gideon made this mistake that, he made this ephod, this apron, and he hung it, and ultimately it was worshipped as an idol. So there's some type of responsibility on his part. That's one. That's a point that's made. And another point that's made is that Gideon did something that wasn't really appropriate. You know what he did wrong? He retired. That was his mistake. He wasn't supposed to retire. He decided to take it easy. And really, his job was to travel, or he should have been to travel around and inspire the Jewish people. Now, all of you people did the best thing by retiring, because you're part of the kollel, studying Torah every day. So there's nothing wrong. What you did was the best thing. Gideon made a mistake. He, instead of joining the Zoom kollel of the Levi Yitzchak Senior Academy, he just hung out in his house with 70 wives, and that. So to a certain extent, he didn't keep to what he should have been doing, and that is, he should have traveled around and tried to inspire, shown some leadership and encouragement to the Jewish people, and keep on. Keep up the level of Yiddishkeit. Yes, David.
You said 70 wives and 70 sons.
Oh, 70 sons. I'm sorry. Many wives. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you for
correcting. Shouting in the background, holy mackerel.
I'm sorry, yeah. No, 70, he had 70 sons, but he had many wives. I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are we in a period between judges, that there's no judges at this time?
Well, I don't know if you would call it that, because the judges ended and then the kings came. So it's sort of like that period ended. The judges era was like a 350-year era. And after that era ended, I don't think we would call ourselves, we're not really connected to that era at all.
Well, there's more judges yet to come.
We are in exile.
But after Gideon, there's still more judges yet to come in this chapter.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about, I thought you meant in today's day and age.
No.
You're talking about where we're holding.
I'm sorry. I meant the end of chapter 8.
The end of chapter 8, yeah, there's still a long period of judges afterwards, yes. Ben, you didn't know.
But during Gideon's time, was there a judge who is no longer have a judge?
we'll soon see the beginning of chapter 9 answers your question in just a
Okay.
few minutes. I don't want to
Okay.
ruin
All right.
your
Getting excited.
suspense. Yes. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say he made another mistake. He had 70 sons, and he said, "My son will not rule on you either." You know, maybe one or two or three of his sons would have wanted to rule and help the people and keep them in line. But he says, no, they won't rule on you either.
So to you, it seems wrong that he did that, because he should have let his sons
Yeah.
rule. Is that what you're
I mean, he
asking?
took himself out. He took himself out. He took himself out. That's okay. But he shouldn't put it on his sons too.
So
Maybe
you're
his
asking,
sons could have been picked to lead the nation.
right. You're asking a good question. You're saying it's very nice to be humble for yourself, but don't be humble for someone else. You know, you don't want to be arrogant and say you want to be king, no problem. But who told you to say that your kids aren't going to be shouldn't be rulers?
Right.
That's what you're asking.
And
But
right.
right.
And
The thing
and
is
the
that
ephod being gold, it might have reminded them of the egel, the golden calf. You know, they were both solid gold. So
that's a very interesting point. That I like. That's a very nice point that you make. That he should have, that Gideon should have recognized the potential for failure with the ephod because it was made out of solid gold, and just like the golden calf. Now that's a very interesting point. About your other point with the fact that the sons, that he sort of didn't allow them to rule. We'll have to soon see, because one of the sons ended up ruling, and you know, it created
the youngest one.
We'll soon see. So it's not so simple. Well, it deserves to be thought about afterwards, really, rather than now. Yes, Miranda.
I think I have an explanation.
Just 1 second, Will. Will, just 1 second. Miranda, I called on
The
Miranda.
judges weren't a hereditary position, correct?
Right, correct.
Didn't go, so that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Okay. Will, yes.
Go back to sometime last week, where his son was supposed to kill the kings. And then even now, it said, I won't rule and my son won't rule. That's in the singular, one son. Then it says that it may be interpreted that 40 years have passed. The land was tranquil for 40 years in Gideon's time. So maybe during those 40 years, the other sons were born.
So Will is asking an interesting question. It says, nor shall my son rule. Maybe one of the sons was born much earlier than all the others, and therefore Gideon talks about the one son, which could be. It could just be a term, used that it's one. He just says, my son won't rule, meaning my oldest son, because normally the oldest son ruled. So that could be the answer to. In other words, you're being medaic. You're seeing from the singular that it seems like he was only talking about one son, but I don't know if it's such a great proof to say that he didn't have any other sons at this point. Because you could say two things. Number one is that normally it was given to the Bechar, the oldest son. So he was specifically referring to the oldest son. Or you could say it was meant one of the sons would have been the ruler and you wouldn't have had a few. So therefore he only says my son and not my sons, because it wasn't, it doesn't go to numerous sons, it goes to one son. So that could be a reason why it just says the singular. But it is an interesting point that you make, that it does say singular. And it could be, we don't have the history of the birth of each of the kids of his. So it is a little unclear what the ages are and if there was an age gap or so, so it is an interesting thought that you bring up.
Okay.
So thank you. Yes,
Rabbi,
Thomas, yeah.
is it possible that by using just the singular, he was really saying that none of my sons will, not one of my sons will
Not
rule?
one. Thank you. You gave a third answer. Thomas, thank you very much. Will, very good answer. Maybe even better than mine. Thomas, thank you. That's a good point. It could mean not even one.
Rabbi, I wanted to ask, why does the pasuk change the name from Yerubal to Gidon within the same one to two pasukim?
Von
Yeah, the
Gidon to
commentaries.
Yerubal.
Yeah, the commentaries mentioned something about this. I believe it's the Me'am Loyes. No, you probably have it there. Do you see anything there in the Me'am Loyes? I think he answers it.
I'm looking, unless I
Oh.
missed it before, I'm looking at it.
Oh.
I don't see anything.
I believe the Me'am Loyes says that until now he's referred to as Gidon as the leader, and when he is like withdrawing from being a leader now, he's going into his retirement relaxation mode, and he's so the verse the pasuk calls him the Yerubal name, which suggests that he's the modest person who is not looking for a high position, and just more like a simple position, the way he was originally, when his father called him Yerubal. So something to that effect, that he's looking for his earlier simple position instead of the leader that he became known as Gidon, like a powerful leader.
One other thing I see, Rabbi Smith, is that it's interesting that he, like Will was saying before, he was saying, my sons are not going to be king. So we don't see a whole conversation in the Torah of one son trying to kill the other son, like David HaMelech had all these sons and they were all trying to kill everybody to take over as the king. You don't see that because it looks like Gidon's sons were not lined up to be king. Therefore, they didn't have all this strife that David HaMelech's sons had.
But
Now,
that
did
what
you read
happened
chapter
at the
9?
end,
Just one second.
yeah, in chapter
David,
9.
No,
David, have you read chapter 9?
no.
Oh, so
I don't want you to spoil the book for
yeah,
me. Okay, I'll be quiet and wait.
yeah. And then you can decide if you want to share with us a thought about the sons fighting afterwards. But
I was thinking because it said
we just lost you. You're muted again. I don't know why.
I'm just seeing that it says Gidon died in a good old age. And he's talking about his 70 sons, and then it says that he died in a good old age. He wouldn't die in a good old age if he had a whole bunch of sons fighting with each other from the 70, trying to become the next king. But because he took away that kingship as a possibility and said, my son's not going to be the king, we don't read about all this killing and fighting of his sons. And like I said, I didn't see chapter 9, but I'll be quiet. I'll hold on.
Right. Really, the truth is, you have a point. But after chapter 9, we can develop it a little better. You have to fit within the story. We can't change the story. So, and it is a very sad story. So let's go a little further. Gidon had 70 sons emerging from his loins, for he had many wives. And I should mention that I was talking about the fact that he settled in his home and he retired, he relaxed. If you contrast what he did with Shmuel, there is where you see Samuel, he traveled around, which is not a comfortable thing to do. And it's not easy, especially in those days when they didn't have Cadillacs or comfortable ways of travel. And Shmuel would travel around and tried to make sure that the community was living up to high standards of Yiddishkeit. And Gidon, he settled in his home. So the commentaries seem to take that as a statement to contrast him to Shmuel Hanavi, who was also considered a judge. Samuel was also considered a judge, and he did go around and tried to, he didn't just take it easy. So Gidon, it says, had 70 sons emerging from his loins, for he had many wives. 31, verse 31, his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son, and he called his name Avimelech. So Gidon had a concubine in Shechem, and a concubine means that this was a woman who was set aside for him as a wife, but not without a full-fledged ceremony of kiddushin, of a marriage contract, and a marriage kiddushin, which is the act of marriage. They didn't actually do the full marriage ceremony. And I don't mean a ceremony of 1,000 people. I mean the ceremony of putting a ring on the wife. But at the same time, it doesn't mean he had relations with some woman, a one-time thing. No, this woman was set aside for him as a wife, just not with all the rules of a wife, meaning the ksuba, which are monetary obligations, and the kiddushin. But this was a wife that was considered a concubine because it didn't have all that, but it wasn't someone who it wasn't a harlot. This was a wife that was miyuchad to him as only for him and no one else. Otherwise, it would have been totally prohibited to have a pelegish, a concubine. Now, even a concubine itself is generally prohibited. Only a king is allowed to have a concubine. And I'm not really sure. The commentaries don't really talk so much about the fact that he had a concubine. Maybe it's only prohibited rabbinically, according to some opinions, and maybe it wasn't yet prohibited at this time. I'm not sure why why this was allowed, but possibly it hadn't been prohibited or at this time, or because otherwise, I know in Maimonides he brings down that only a king had a permit to marry a concubine. Again, a concubine, someone who is specifically limited to this husband and no one else, and just doesn't have all the rules of marriage. In any event, Gidon did have a concubine. In addition to his many wives, he had a concubine. She lived in Shechem, and
was she Canaanite?
No.
No.
Not that we know of.
Moabite or Canaanite?
No. A
Maybe
Jewish
that's
wife.
why he couldn't marry her.
No. They were married.
Okay.
She bore him a son. He called his name Avimelech. Now, Gidon, it is interesting that he had this name. Avimelech means the father, a king. And we'll soon see what he tries to do. It's some type of like a prophecy. We're talking about names in some of the other classes about when you name someone, it's sort of like a prophecy. So, and this Avimelech is going to try to take over the kingship. So his name was Avimelech, and Gidon's son, Gidon, the son of Yoash, died at a good old age, and he was buried by the grave of Yoash, his father, in Ophrah. Aviezrites. That was the name of the family, Avi Ha'ezri, and of the the extended family, the family, from the big family tree that we called the Aviezri. So this is the end of Gideon's life. And now it happened when Gideon died that the children of Israel once again went astray after the Baalim, after this idols called Baal, and they set Baal Beris as a god for themselves. So that was the name of their idol, and the children of Israel did not remember Hashem, their God, who rescued them from the hand of their surrounding enemies. And then verse 35 says that also they did not perform kindness with the household of Yerubbaal, who is Gideon, commensurate with all the goodness that he had done with Israel. So here we have the fact that the Jewish people did not show gratitude to Hashem, and they didn't show gratitude to the family of Gideon. We'll soon see to what extent that means. What were they supposed to do to the family of Gideon? How did they not show gratitude to the family of Gideon? And what we do see here is interesting, that it sort of like goes hand in hand. That even though you might think that you're a very nice person because you're always show appreciation and respect to other people, but a person doesn't have that same respect for Hashem, ultimately they are somehow missing even in their respect for others. And the same thing applies the opposite. If you respect Hashem, but you don't respect others, you're going to somehow be missing in your respect for Hashem. It'll ultimately come out, it'll shine, if you're missing respect. So that's why it really goes together. I know a lot of people, they tell me, Rabbi, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a very nice person and kind person. So I often tell them, well, what about God? Are you nice to God? You're nice to other people, but what about God? Do you ever show any appreciation when God does you a favor? He gave you everything that you have. Very nice that you are very kind to people who do you favors, and even the people who didn't do you favors, you're kind to, you try to help them out. But what about helping out Hashem, who created you, who brought you here, who gave you all the blessings that you have? Do you have gratitude? People think they're such nice people, but then they stab God in the back. So they're nice people to others, but then they go and say, they tell God to go, find someone else, and not interested in helping you. And so, to a certain extent, here we see it really goes hand in hand, that you can't consider yourself a nice person if you don't respect Hashem and you don't respect people, because either way you're missing. It has to be it has to work both ways, and with both spiritual and material matters. You can't really consider yourself a nice person if we don't respect Hashem. And so it's the children of Israel didn't remember Hashem, and they didn't remember Gideon. Now comes chapter 9, and Avimelech, the son of Yerubbaal. Here we talk about the son of the concubine, and he went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke to them, and to the entire family of his mother's father's household. So his mother is from this city of Shechem. And I must say that what really gets me is the fact that this is the city of Shechem, and it reminds us of the story of how the one individual of Shechem, this Shechem ben Hamor, he raped Dinah, and he got the whole community to go circumcise themselves, fooling them into thinking that they're going to get married to the Jewish people and they'll have so many women. Really, very surprising story about this city. And here we have another sad story about Shechem. And then, of course, we know how Shimon and Levi, they went and killed out the city, and Yaakov was not happy about it. And here we have another story of someone from Shechem. Now, Avimelech is a regular of Shechem, so this is his hometown, not the other kids of Gidon. Gidon's other kids did not live in Shechem. They lived in Oprah. Now Shechem, in Shechem, this Avimelech knows all the people there. He's friendly. He's got his aunts and his uncles. They're all from his mother's side. They all live in Shechem, and he's buddy with them, trying to he's campaigning. That's really what he's doing. He's campaigning because he ultimately wants to be king, and he wants to lead the Jewish people, and doesn't want to have any competition. And so he speaks to the family and his mother's father's household, and he says, "Speak now in the ears of the inhabitants of Shechem." He gets them to campaign for him. So he gets all of his relatives all, excited, and he says, "What's better for you? You want that 70 men should rule over you, all the sons of Yerubal, or that one man rule over you? And remember, I am your bone and flesh." So he makes them feel guilty that he's their relative, and you gotta, I'm your blood and flesh and blood. How could you not help me out? And he makes them feel guilty. And then he says, imagine if you have 70, there's 70 sons of Gidon, and can you imagine what's going to be like supporting them? Imagine what taxes are going to be like. Now we only have we only had one Gidon. We paid taxes, whatever it was, 10%, 20%, 15%. Imagine 70? We're going to be giving 90% taxes. How are we going to support these families? And Gidon had 70 children. Imagine what each of them are going to have. How many kids? They each have who knows how many kids. We're going to be stuck paying crazy amount of taxes. And this is going to be the worst thing for the entire community. And better you should make me king. And we got to get rid of all of these people, anyone that's going to think that they're going to be competing. So his mother's brother spoke all these words about him in the ears of all the inhabitants of Shechem. So my point earlier was, it seems like Shechem people are very gullible. The people of Shechem originally, they all accepted this idea of circumcising themselves. And now we have another group of people living in Shechem, and these are Jewish people, but they're very gullible. They're listening to this crazy idea that this Abimelech wants to convince them that, it's very dangerous. We're going to have 70, going to have all these people taking, 70 leaders taking our taxes. We're not going to have any money left. They're hard inclined after Avimelech, and he convinced them. And he got his campaigners to help him. And for they said, he is our kinsman, and we got to help him out. He's our relative. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver from the temple of Baal Bris. They took from they took 70 pieces of gold, of silver, and they commentaries mention, one of the commentaries mentions it symbolized that he's going to make sure to get rid of these 70, the 70 brothers, so they won't have to pay the taxes to them or have them rule over them. That's another thing. Imagine 70 people making decrees on you. It's bad enough one government. Imagine you have 70 governments ruling, making more decrees and things. Anyway, they wanted to get rid of these 70 people. So, it doesn't say clearly that they understood that he's going to have them murdered, but I guess it was, a little vague. And there definitely was that idea, that, definitely was such a possibility maybe. But anyway, and with them, Avimelech hired, with these 70 silver pieces, he hired boorish, impetuous men, and they followed him. He came to his father's house to Oprah and murdered his brothers, the sons of Yerubal, the sons of Gidon, 70 men at one rock. But Yosem, Yerubal's youngest son, was left, for he had hidden. He was hiding. So therefore, he didn't get killed. So only 69 of the sons were killed, and one was left. And all the inhabitants of Shechem and all of Beis Milo gathered together, and they went and crowned Abimelech as king by the plain of the monument, which was in Shechem. So now Abimelech got what he wanted, killed all his brothers except one, and they told Yosem what happened. Yosem was in hiding, and Yosem, he went and he stood atop Mount Gerizim, and he raised his voice and he cried out. And he's speaking to the people of Shechem, and he cries out. He said to them, "Listen to me, inhabitants of Shechem, so that God may listen to you. The trees went to anoint a king over themselves." And he gives them a parable. He says, the trees went to anoint a king over themselves. they said to the olive tree, reign over us. And this symbolizes the first great shofet, judge, that the Jewish people had. He was very knowledgeable in Torah. His name was Osniel ben Knaz. He helped the Jewish people remember all the Torah that was forgotten in the time of Joshua. And he was the first shofet. We learned about him. So he symbolizes the olive tree. And they went to the olive tree and they said, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, shall I cause my richness to cease, whereby God and men honor themselves through me, and go to wave over the trees? You think that's what I should do, just to wave over other trees, be the king? That's what I want, to just get rid of my richness, the lofty mission I have. I'm just going to get rid of, just to be able to wave over some barren trees. And used for the menorah, I'm used for the altar, the offerings and tabernacle, and my mission is Torah, to illuminate the nation. And so the olive tree refused. So then the trees said to the fig tree, you go and reign over us. And this fig tree symbolizes another one of the Shoftim, the judges. This symbolizes Devorah. She was considered like the fig tree, she was sweet. She was very sweet. And she devoted herself to the Jewish people, and her sweetness, it says, was the Torah that she taught, and her prophecy. And so they told the fig tree, you should reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I cause my sweetness, my goodly produce, to cease and go to wave over the trees? Is that the way I'm gonna, is that the greatness of me, that I can be a little bigger than the other trees and wave over them? So then the trees said to the grapevine, and who does the grapevine symbolize? Gidon, his father. Yosem is talking, the youngest son who wasn't killed, who was in hiding. He's speaking to the people of Shem, and he's telling them, think about my father, the Gidon, the grapevine. And just like the wine is poured on the altar, Gidon made an altar for Hashem. We learned about it. And in Gidon, they told him, you should go and reign over us. But the grapevine said to them, shall I give my vintage that gladdens God and men? Meaning that it helps, if it's used properly, righteous people drink it, then it's actually a big advantage. But if it's, so it gladdens God and men. And go, should I get rid of it and go and to wave over the trees? Then all the trees went to the thorn and said, you go and reign over us. The thorn said to the trees, and who is the thorn? The thorn symbolizes Avi Melech, the child of the concubine. And he is the one who the thorn said to the trees, if with honesty do you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, then may a flame come forth from the thorn and consume the cedars of Lebanon. So Abimelech is similar to the thorn. He has no benefit for anyone. It just harms anyone that comes close to it. That's the thorn. The thorn just takes the sustenance and creates pain to people. And the thorn has nothing to give. It only takes. And it harms anyone in its way. Not only that, but it's flammable. And so therefore, if it ever starts a fire, it just destroys all the surrounding trees. And so this is who you have chosen. And so now we're on verse 16. So now, if you have acted with honesty and sincerity and crowned Abimelech, and if you have done good with Yerubbaal and his household, and if you have acted toward him corresponding to the kindness of his hands, as my father went to war for you, as he cast his life aside and rescued you from the hand of Midian, yet you rose up against my father's house today and murdered his son 70 souls on one rock, and you crowned Abimelech, son of his maidservant, over the inhabitants of Shem, because he is your kinsman. So if you have acted with honesty and sincerity toward Yerubal and toward his household this day, then rejoice with Avimelech, and let him also rejoice with you. But if not, may a fire go forth from Avimelech and consume the inhabitants of Shechem and Beis Milo, and may a fire go forth from the inhabitants of Shechem and Beth Milo and consume Avimelech. And then Yosem ran away. He fled and went to a place called Be'era and settled there because of Avimelech, his brother. So that is